71, and to have a statement like that from Noam Chomsky is really good. And the company you're in on Dark Odyssey is really incredible. So I'm really glad we could get here and do this. Welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Philip Jones Griffiths. And Philip Jones Griffiths is a photojournalist, and we have books of his, 2 books of his, Vietnam Inc. and Dark Odyssey, that have highlighted his photographic career, which has gone back, I guess, almost 30 years or so. But we're going to be talking with him and showing some of his photographs, and it's really a great personal pleasure to welcome to the program Philip Jones. Welcome very much to Manhattan Network.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
You've been at this for quite a while. We have a clip we're going to roll, a video clip that shows that you're originally from Wales and so forth.
Indeed, yes.
And you were the president of Magnum Photo and covered Vietnam. You've had a really distinguished career. But I wonder, maybe we could take a few minutes. Phil, that is correct. You were born in Wales?
Indeed, in a small village in North Wales, and I had to learn English in school. That puts me in the same league as half the people in New York, I'm sure.
Yes.
Since then, of course, I've basically been running around the world trying to postpone puberty, not very successfully, but I've traveled to about 140 countries and covered a few wars. I'm not really a war photographer.
You're not, are you?
No,
you seem to have come up, yeah.
Yeah, I'm more interested in why people go to war rather than the bang-bang of war.
Yeah, yeah. Or the effects of it on the folks, maybe?
Well, yes, I mean...
Human rights concerns are very much in your context?
Yeah, I think one's always looking at essentially the victims. Because after all, they're the ones that suffer.
Yeah.
They're the people who do have to withstand what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that... I think it's pretty important for people to be reminded. Unfortunately, modern warfare, as we're about to find out, in Iraq has got to the point where the people declaring war on Iraq don't see the casualties, certainly not the way they would have done in the past.
You had a quote in one of the captions I saw, you said, where it just becomes an automated machine or something, a killing machine rather than human beings.
Well, I think that during the...
certain dark qualities.
Yes, quite. Yeah. During the Vietnam War, you know, Westmoreland, or Waste-Moreland, as we prefer to call him, did in fact project that in the future there would be an automated battlefield. Yeah. And even in Vietnam, I did suggest once that the Americans could have used a group of Boy Scouts instead of soldiers, in the sense that what would happen would be an American unit would go into an area, and if they were attacked, they would, if they were attacked, they would immediately retreat, and the bombs, the artillery, the long-range stuff would come in on the position of the enemy. So all you really needed was someone to sort of ferret out the enemy rather than actually fight them.
Yeah, forward observers or intelligence.
On a mixture of both.
Yeah, and it's getting worse. In Bosnia, they had all those bombs. I mean, there was no casualties, American casualties at all at the bombing.
Quite.
And it was,
well, I think
people get that in their head as though it's a win-win-win-win-win-win-win-win situation for us.
Quite.
Yeah.
And of course, it is often very much not the case.
For the others. Yeah. There's a term, I'm not sure who it was it Mencken? I'm not sure, it said journalist. The role of the journalist is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, something like that?
Well,
now, when we think in terms of print journalism, or we think in terms of a liberal, conservative bias or whatever, that kind of thing, they tend to think, well, you could tell by the writings of people that they are on one side, they're for the afflicted, or they're trying to comfort the, the afflicted, or afflict the comforter. It's the same with when we get into graphic and we get into the real representation of photojournalism or film, that the bias of the person, or what it is they're trying to bring out, comes out as starkly or as obviously as in photography as it does in writing, or you could photograph the victim of the bomb or the general who's celebrating the fact that the bomb hit right on. That sort of thing. Can you address that?
Well, yes. I think that the nature of photography is such that you can photograph what's happening, or you can turn and photograph what's not happening, and present both as as the reality of that moment.
Yeah.
You got to understand that the pictures that one ends up seeing are often being filtered through, so that the self-censorship of the photographer on the scene is one thing they have to worry about, they being the power elite, those people who control us, right? But then
they have to worry that some good ones will get through, or
well,
from their propaganda.
well, no, from their propaganda point of view, they are worried that that the photographer exercises a certain amount of self-censorship. Then the stuff goes through an editing system full of people, usually who have very little knowledge of what's going on, and then finally the pictures appear in newspapers, magazines, or on television, all of which are controlled by, in one or two famous cases like General Electric and NBC, by people who actually make the weapons and are in favor of the war.
That's right.
So by the time you come through all of this, the chances of getting a meaningful picture in print, as it were, or seen by the public
in a mainline
is going to be slim. And of course the main effort of control by those in power are usually the photographers, not even so much the journalists, because the journalists can always make it up. I mean, they don't have to be there. The thing about photographers is because they have to be there.
That's right.
Actually there, they're the most likely to see what's really happening and to understand the truth.
That's right.
Once they understand the truth, they're dangerous because they're unlikely to be so easily to be controlled.
Yeah, and that can be shown in photographs. There would be a subtlety in terms of being able to convey a message. There's a picture has 1,000 words or something, where you could see a picture and some people would see it a rock shock test or something, where some people would see it one way or another, but messages can get through maybe subliminally even. Or
well, yes, I mean, I think that we all, most good photographers anyway, would attempt to take into account who the audience is and to approach them and get through to them on an emotional level.
Yes.
I personally believe that the healthy reaction to looking at the obscenity, the pornography of violence is to close your eyes or to close the page.
Yeah.
So it's important to be able to take the kind of picture that resonates with a real person. And I think that's why photography is so dangerous for those guys up there, but it's so powerful for the rest of us that it doesn't even need. It is the ultimate universal language.
Yeah, it is. It's like it's life as you walk through it. Yeah.
However, of course, there are examples, many, they've happened to me many times, where my pictures have been miscaptioned to the point where the opposite, what I was trying to say, what I was trying to say was nullified by an erroneous caption.
I was going to ask you that. You were president for a long time of the famous Magnum for 5 years. I guess you ran that tenure. That was a long time to be in that responsible position. And the photographs are important, the editing, and then also the captioning is really important. Is the photographer generally able to have responsibility for the captioning, or do you get you say it goes to Newsweek or Time or something like that? The captioning is all done by the editors, and your picture, once you've given it over, the captioning is not in your control? Or how does that work?
Well, how it works is this, is that every picture editor will say, captions, we need a caption, we need a caption.
Yeah.
You give them the caption, and then they change it.
They do.
Or somebody tells them to change it. And guess what? Magnum, I'm proud to say, we have a stamp. And on that stamp it says, this picture cannot be used without this following caption.
Oh, good.
And that sometimes works. So that we're not naive. We're not kids in this. We understand the power of a lot of what we take. We understand how it can be misused, and therefore we insist that the picture the caption has to be true to the photograph, and that caption has to be used, and it can't be used with a different caption.
And you can make that stick even though you're doing contract negotiations with the people that have all the money.
Well, you can, you don't,
you know what I'm saying?
well, of course, but what happens is that, let's assume that they have a picture of mine and they say, we want to change it. We want to say...
Now, that's another thing I wanted to ask you about changing the picture, but the caption.
No. Let's say they've got a picture of mine and they want to change the meaning of the picture
by the caption.
By saying this is not a victim of American bombing, let's say it's the victim of the Viet Cong bombing.
Yes, right. There's a good...
Exactly. Now, in a case like that, if that picture has a stamp on the back saying you've got to use the correct caption, if they decide to not do that, then it becomes a talking point. It might even appear as a small piece in one of the photographic magazines. No, the New York Times is the one that did it to me.
Oh, I see. Well, that,
but in other words, it's too dangerous for them. Well, put it this way: it's not good public relations for them to contravene and to use the wrong caption knowingly, and then try to, in some way, pretend it was a mistake or whatever.
Yeah, and how much weight do the photojournalists have, being independent? You got independent photojournalists at Magnum, the community of photojournalists, or does that spill over into TV cameramen and that sort of thing? Is there a camaraderie there? And how much weight do they have vis-a-vis the captains of the communication industry, you know, in terms of the integrity of the message that they're trying to convey? Do you think, over your experience?
My experience is we have very little.
You do?
And I think the suicidal, my colleagues who have contemplated suicide are the ones that believed that it was a perfect world and that they can, whatever they see, they photograph, they have a message, and somehow
that's going to get out.
It's going to, exactly.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't get out, they get depressed. I remember a colleague of mine saying, I'm going to give up photography because I did a story for Life magazine about Harlem, and it was really told the truth about Harlem, and guess what? It was so mangled that when it got out, nothing happened. Harlem didn't change. Justice didn't come to those people. Therefore, I failed. I failed. I failed. I said, look,
that's an idealistic thing. It's a wrong world to live in.
We're not in ivory towers.
No.
We could.
What's the trending, Philip? You've been at this for quite a while, 30-odd years or so. What's the trending in terms of the ability of the integrity and the conscience, if that's the right word, of the independent photojournalist to be able to get that message through the filtering process?
You know,
is it getting worse or better, or what?
It's getting different.
Different. Well,
the huge changes have taken place in our industry, right? In the sense that a lot of the independent photo agencies have gone. A lot of photographers who would previously have cared about telling the truth and now cared more about keeping their jobs. They've been amalgamated into these huge conglomerates. The richest man in the world now owns the biggest photo agency in the world. Gates owns Corbis. And this concentration of power into fewer and fewer hands does not augur well for the future. But guess what?
What? New things on the horizon?
No. We're like all those waiters in New York tonight who want to be actors, who are part-time actors, who do a bit of acting on the side. In other words, the photographer will always want to do something, and somehow they'll scrape together. And in the city right now, there are photographers who are serving table like their actor brothers. For the purpose of accumulating enough money to go somewhere and make a definitive statement, which might turn out to be of great historical value because no one will publish it right now because it goes against the grain.
Any hope in the internet and new avenues, new venues, new expressions? I mean, because they're getting more and more to where that's getting a little traction now. Some of
of course,
the internet and the democratization. Information wants to be free. Notions.
Indeed, and that is why we're all kind of enthusiastic about the internet. And I suppose I'm proud to be able to say that. But I'm actually more familiar with it than my teenage daughters.
No, come on. Now you're getting. I really think that.
Well, no, because
They've just been good.
Look, when I said in 1968 to Magnum that one day our pictures would go.
68.
In 68, I wrote a memo on the future, and I said that one day our photographs will travel down telephone wires. They assumed that I was smoking the wrong stuff.
Right.
They thought I was totally mad. So I have tried to keep abreast of every development. You know, I put Magnum on the internet before there was an internet in 1980.
Amazing.
And I've kept abreast of all those developments. And I think that I've not done it because I'm a techie. I used to be a pharmacist, you know.
I know that. Boots.
The chemist.
And before Boots, there was Boots. I know.
Yeah, but that's
That's for an in-joke for the Londoners.
Well, it's an in-joke, yes. It's the equivalent of a Duane Reade or
yeah,
something.
it is.
But believe me,
Yes.
pharmacy is very, very important.
Yeah, I think it is.
Because it is so bloody boring that you are bound to want to do
Did
something
you see,
else with your life.
I saw a thing the other day. It was Kurzweil, I think, reported that the pharmacy, your prescription almost certainly has been served by a robot now. They got robotic systems that are more accurate and faster and more efficient, and they're going to move in on the pharmacists in terms of
and they don't take sick days.
That's right. They don't take sick days. Oh, and that may be a metaphor larger for the society.
But there is one person now who should have stayed a pharmacist.
Who is that? Boots? No, I mean who?
Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, really? She was a pharmacist?
She's
I didn't know that.
Pharmacist, yes,
yeah,
and she unfortunately for humankind, she took up politics.
Yeah, she took up supply side
and ruined Britain.
She wrote a supply side, prescription for Britain that got us all in deep doo-doo. Well, listen, we got a lot. You got so much. You got such a career. Now we got a couple of things here, and one is I want to show really quickly first here to the camera, and we're going to show some of these photographs. This is a book. You can just see what the cover looks like here. We're going to show some of these photographs from this book, and it's called Vietnam Inc., and it was put out, I guess, from your work. You were in Vietnam from 66 to...
basically 71.
71, and this was put out in 1971.
Yeah.
And he was one of the... We want to talk about this and show some of the photographs from this. And this book, this particular new edition, doesn't say on the cover, but on the new edition, this has a long and really thoughtful foreword, I guess it is, by Noam Chomsky, who you know from Vietnam days.
Well, from those old days,
yeah,
when the book first came out.
Yeah, and then let me show this other one that's out. It's a major book. This one's called, you can see on the cover, this one's called Dark Odyssey, and you can see that's a photograph of a police officer in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, as a soldier, actually.
A soldier looking through a shield that's plastic and so forth. It's really a haunting image. It's one of the images in here. We're going to show pictures from this too, and I would just say that this is published. I want to say at the outset, this one, Dark Odyssey, is published by an organization called
Aperture.
Aperture, and the other three photographers that are selected, I think, if I'm not mistaken, maybe you can fill me in. There's you, Philip Jones Griffiths, with this one, and then there's Dorothea Lange.
Yeah.
Just to name a few of the, and then there's Kappa, Frank Kappa, and then there's Sagado. Right?
Yeah.
And then is there another one that was Bresson? Or?
Well, Cartier-Bresson has always been.
Is he one of those?
He was one of the founders of Magnum.
Yeah, and is his work included in this?
Well, he has indeed been published by these people. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to point that out. That's the leading photographers of our you're in good company in terms of the people they've selected for this book series.
Yeah.
And we're going to show that in a minute. We're going to show pictures from that, and then we're going to try and do justice to the pictures. They're beautiful, and it's a career that goes back to 1966, as I said. But I've also seen that at the turn of the millennium, the Welsh and English, you're from Wales. You're originally from Wales.
Yeah.
He speaks Welsh, which is a little unusual, and he sings a good, tenor, baritone?
No, that's one of the reasons I was asked to leave Wales.
You don't sing?
Yes, I don't drink beer.
You can't be in.
No, I don't drink beer. I don't play rugby. And I can't sing, so they
How
asked
can
me.
You Welsh? You
so they asked me to leave.
You may want to investigate your DNA, young man. But anyway, but he was in Wales, and they did a special television presentation that was carried, I think, on January 1 of the year 2000.
That's right. Yeah.
And among the luminaries, there was Philip Jones Griffiths, and they have and we have about a 4-minute or so piece that we want to run now that. That shows him. It shows a book fair that was being in Vancouver that's presenting this book, and then it goes into a little bit of the village in which he was born, with Philip speaking in Welsh. So don't be surprised if you think it's some sort of language, and that's actually Philip speaking that.
Yes, and unfortunately we don't have subtitles. So.
No, we don't have subtitles, but I want to run this now. It's about 4 minutes or so, and then we'll come back. So if they could set that up in the studio, we'll run that. Then we'll come back and we'll go through some of these really handsome books of his and talk more about photojournalism. It's your pleasure talking with one of the great photojournalists of our time, that's Philip Jones Griffiths. Happy to be able to share his perceptions with you, and if you would run that tape now, then please. Thank you very much.
In my We're here today to celebrate the opening of an exhibition of photographs by Philip Jones Griffiths, who is one of the world's great photojournalists. For 4 decades, Philip Jones Griffiths' photographs have helped us to understand the world around us, in particular to think about the consequences of trauma, conflict, and war on individual lives. He's an active humanist who supports the notion that one individual can make a very big difference. Please join me in welcoming Philip Jones Griffiths.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to see you all here, and it's wonderful to be on Canadian soil. Not quite in Asia, but pretty close. I do a lot of traveling, and I do gravitate towards Asia when I get there whenever I can, and it's nice to see some.
I ni does dim pwrpas tynnu llun os nad yw'r ddelwedd yn dweud rhywbeth deifio am natur bywyd. Does dim byd gwaith na amfoddhad ar ran y gwyliwr, a dwi wastad wedi ceisio ei herio trwy brocio a phrofocio gyda lluniau o bedwar ban y byd.
Yeah. Right.
Mae tynnu'r llun yn gymharol hawdd.
My passion, as always, is Asia, and I've been doing a story on Agent Orange, the victims of Agent Orange.
Be sy'n anodd ydy cyrraedd y gwyliwr a'i gydwybod.
In Vietnam.
Cefais fy ngeni a fy magu yma yn Rhyddlan. Pentref prodferth, tawel, braidd yn boring, neu o leiaf dyna oedd yn un meddwl ar y pryd. Roedd yn wastad yn breuddwydio am adael y lle, a dyna union be wnes i. Fy mhasbort oedd fy nghamera, ac adeg hynny, roedd bob ffordd yn arwain i Llundain. Roedd bywyd y pentra'n troi o gwmpas yr ysgol a'r capel. Tair y gwaith y sil.
Well, that's really beautiful. And that's the town is that the town you were born in that we shot?
Yes, it is. It's a small little village in North Wales.
Yeah.
And it's...
beautiful.
Well, it's a pretty place, yeah. A bit boring, but...
A bit boring,
yes, and mind you, if you wanted to be a pharmacist, I suppose it was quite a fascinating
place.
Right.
I
didn't.
Yeah, and you did. You became a pharmacist, and then you took up there, and then you went, I guess by 61 or so, you were already off as an independent journalist, something like that?
Yeah.
If I read right?
Yeah.
Do you remember what led you in that direction, away from the pharmacy?
Well, essentially, I needed a way to get out of my little village.
I see. You were feeling a little claustrophobic.
I realized I worked out very early on, when I was about 16, I think. I worked out that the camera could be the passport out. And that's what I
remember your first camera?
Oh yeah, very well. In fact, not only that, I remember them. I've got them all.
You still got it, really? Good for you.
I have an inability to throw away old equipment, which means I have to keep buying even larger apartments all the time.
Yeah.
I've got all that old stuff. Yes.
Well, the first one, were you able to get a sophisticated one at the outset?
No, not at the very outset. No, I mean I used the family box Brownie.
Right.
But it didn't take long to work out that one needed something better.
I had my next door friend of mine, a friend like of one family, my best friend. You grow up when you're a kid, and he did it, and he took photography. He said it was a miracle of his life when he took the first one. He put it in the developing tray, and the picture started coming out. He was hooked. You know.
Indeed. Well, I think that applies to all of us. There is something very magical about it.
And now it's moving really quickly, too. We want to pick up from that film and get into your book here, but it's picking up really quickly because we're now going through this digital position. And I wanted to ask you just real quick, and then let's get into the book. But, you know, we said about the captioning, whether you have control over the captioning of something. They're now getting with the, if I understand, with the digital photography process and so forth, and you can see it in movies and so forth, but they could just move images around and change them and edit them within the movie, within the picture itself. And what do you have to say about that?
Well, indeed. One's always been aware that the way things are going, I mean, it's possible to put Lady Bird Johnson on the grassy knoll with a smoking gun in her hand.
And look real.
And no one could tell that it wasn't her.
Yeah.
And so the ability to manipulate pictures is so horrendous. I maintain that in a rather, this is a terrible thing for a photographer to say, but in a sense, photography was a shooting star. It really documented one century, the 20th century. It wasn't feasible to record very accurately in the 19th century, although there are some great pictures from that period. But from now on, no one never has to believe a photograph. No one ever has to say, this is a picture, because you know, the photography has always had a certain veracity. People have believed what they see. That's why it's a photograph in your passport, not a drawing or a painting. But that's gone. And that's what Photoshop essentially has done to our profession. It's rendered it unbelievable. And
huge implications to that. I
mean,
just
enormous,
in terms of,
enormous.
Reality.
Yes, sure.
How, you know, reality.
And of course, you don't, when you see a picture of, in an advertisement of an elephant walking up the side of the Empire State Building, you know that it's fake.
Yeah.
But what happens when Time magazine doctors, you know, somebody's picture on the cover to make it look as if the person is not who he really is?
Oh, yeah.
In other words, I think that we accept it in things like advertising, which we don't expect to be true. But when it comes to journalism, then, of course, essentially, you're finished once you do that.
That's a pretty dire thing. And journalism is becoming showbiz. I mean, entertainment values with GE and NBC are all one, and it's, you know, that kind of thing. So it's becoming showbiz kind of thing. And so, I mean, there must be some agencies or mechanisms by which there can be some holding on to standards or something that this is kosher. This is a kosher photography.
Well, indeed. Well, in the sort of decline, the Gadarenian rush towards the precipice, as it were, there's been a couple of blips a few days ago where you know, the head of AOL and the head of Time Warner, Isaacson, you know, have been given the boot. Both were out to make money, and the content was of very little importance to them.
You felt that with both Case and Isaacson,
it's what they essentially wanted to do was to trivialize.
You feel that?
Yes. Well,
is that a trend in journalism?
Well, of course it is. It's a well-known trend. And
so they were part of a trend.
Well, certainly,
unique.
So at the moment, some of us are naive enough to believe that the corner has been turned and the people will suddenly start being interested in what's than the truth. However, of course, I would say that we're living in, we're living in a time when the purpose of the powers that be, the purpose of journalism and information in all its different forms is to essentially fool most of the people most of the time.
All the time.
And
heading for all.
The statistics as of today are that half the people in this country believe that Saddam Hussein bombed the World Trade Center.
Yeah, I know. It's true.
They think that. Which shows you the success of how you can trivialize people. I mean, during the Gulf War, for instance, the University of Detroit did research which showed that the longer you watch television, the less you understood about the Gulf War. The people who watched it
The more you watch, the less you know.
the people who watched it least understood most of what was really happening.
They documented that.
So it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. But to get back to the earlier point about the way that whole thing is affecting our industry, as it were, I call it industry, our profession, our whatever.
Calling?
It is calling even. I mean, look,
Hopefully.
It has
there is that in the human
the quality.
spirit. By God, there is some of that.
It has the qualities of a calling, yes. In other words, no matter what the obstacles are, and the obstacles right now for a photojournalist have never been greater, we still persevere. We still somehow manage to come up with what it takes to get those pictures that at least we can say to ourselves, if nobody will publish them, maybe there'll be a book. But even if there's not a book, we have done it.
There's the internet.
And there's
it's
the
there
internet.
for the record, and those things are being picked up. And I'd like to think maybe in a small way or in a certain way, we're in access, public access, where they're beginning to do some. In a certain sense, there are people that are of that nature who will find an avenue of expression or a venue or a way of expression through the public access movement. I'd like to put a plug in for public access. There's one possible small blip.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's great. We could go on talking the philosophy of this, but let's get to the book. Let's get to this book again. You saw it. It was, in the film clip, it showed that they had that thing out in Vancouver. But this, I want to make sure that I don't make this. I want to bring this cover down. But this is the book Vietnam Inc. Tell me about this. You were over there in Vietnam, '66 until so forth, and you were covering the war for Magnum, I guess,
yes,
right?
Yes. Although my secret was that I always intended to do a book. I mean, I actually went to Vietnam for the purpose of making a book. Of course, the publisher said, "Oh, you'll be back in 3 months."
But you were filing pictures for Time and so forth, or for other magazines?
No,
or Magnum to contract to others? How was that
Magnum.
done?
The way Magnum works is that they would get me assignments, very few as it happened, and pictures could then also be sold to people. I mean, a magazine would need a picture to illustrate something. They would come to Magnum Library, and we would sell it to them. Things were very, very tough.
Magnum
at first.
was in New York then?
Well, it's international. It was,
Yeah, it is,
it was in those days, it was New York and Paris.
New York and Paris. And you had to send the photographs, and you didn't have
Well,
the internet downlinking
no.
or anything like that. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, of course.
Yeah, it was the same with newsreel footage. Had to be developed.
I once spent 2 years in Vietnam without once talking to anybody on the telephone outside of Vietnam.
Really?
I mean, even the phones didn't work. The mail was very thing, and then of course there was cables.
And you were there in '66, which is fairly early for a lot. And tell me a little bit about the camaraderie of the reporters that were there. You knew Mr. Halberstrom, I guess, and others, and there was a small group. And what was it like in the early phases?
Well, what it was like was that I thought it became very, very important not to spend too much time with my colleagues, because there's a tendency for the press always to become very incestuous, and they spread stories amongst themselves, so that really, I think the way to understand is to get out, is to see what's going on. And I, being, perhaps because I was a pharmacist, decided to very methodically go to every province in South Vietnam and visit the whole country from top to bottom.
You did.
Just to find out what was going on, because I felt that I needed to understand what it was all about. It was obvious that what we were being told it was about was not true. It was incorrect. These highly intelligent Vietnamese who had dealt with foreigners for 2,000 years were not these stupid gooks that the Americans said they were. It was obvious that that could not be the case. In fact, the contrast between these very intelligent Davids versus these rather happy-go-lucky, deadly Goliaths. It was so obvious
Yeah.
that I wanted to find out what was really going on.
Yeah.
And I discovered that what is often forgotten when one hears ludicrous phrases mentioned, like the press lost the war for us in Vietnam. The fact is that most of the press were gung-ho and totally in favor of the war.
They were, right, up until...
Well, yeah, even
when did
until
the tide... the Americans were, and then the tide turned around, what, after Cambodia? Or when did the tide turn in mass? I mean,
the big change was after 68, after the Tet Offensive.
all right,
But even then, people were not saying the war is wrong. They were saying we're not fighting it correctly.
it's not, yeah, right.
So that the people who felt that it was an immoral war, that it should not have been fought at all.
Or a geostrategic mistake on a big scale.
Well,
Misjudgment.
well,
which
that
Mr.,
is a
you know, it was a
that
mistake.
is an
McNamara
escape
said.
hatch, yes, to get out. But if you say, look, this war is morally indefensible and should not have taken place, those people, right to the very end, were very, very few and far between.
Really?
And of course, what you did get, that as the years passed after the war, many of those hawks suddenly became doves and talked about how they opposed the war.
Well, anyway, you were over there. We got some photographs here. And I'm going to, let's see if Sylvia, if we can hold these up and you can see some of these. We'll try and get good renderings if we can. But you want to talk to this one, Sylvia?
Yeah, well, this is a place called the A Shau Valley, which is in the northern part of South Vietnam. This is actually a B-52 bomb crater. This is a 1,000-pound bomb crater, and I was wandering around, and it was a very dangerous operation, to tell you the truth. A third of the helicopters going in on this particular was shot down. Fortunately, they didn't hit the one I was in, so that's why I'm still here.
Yes, indeed. Yes. You want to show more of that?
And this guy is actually taking a. He was actually, I think, about to. I never saw quite what I think he was about to bathe, though. He's about to get some water.
He made a
and
bathtub,
it looks as if he's diving into that hole, never to come out again.
Yeah,
that's why that picture was used sort of iconically.
Okay, and we're just going to go through a few of these. How many are there in this book?
Oh, there's almost 300.
300.
But this is a picture that I took not very far from My Lai, as it happened, and I was on an operation with these soldiers. We went into a village, usual routine, round up everybody you can find, blow up all the places they could hide, pull outside. We went about a kilometer away onto a hilltop and then brought in an artillery barrage and killed everybody that was left there.
Oh, boy. What year would this have been about?
I think that was 67.
Boy, oh, boy.
It was a pretty standard sort of operation, search and destroy, they used to call them.
You seem to be looking at this one now.
Yeah, well, this is a picture actually that was taken in Saigon, just on the outskirts of Saigon. There was I'll tell you the story very quickly. A few Viet Cong went in, started shooting up the place. The ARVN, that's the South Vietnamese troops, would come in. They would loot the place, and it was declared that they couldn't hold it. The American 9th Division troops came in with all their helicopters and basically blew the place apart. And this is one of the casualties. Little boy is crying over his dead sister. This is rocket fire. It's very characteristic. The wounds she receives. These wounds are very characteristic. A lot of small little wounds.
Rocket fire?
Rocket
shrapnel, they call it?
Well, it's a kind of shrapnel. Often it was high-density plastic, so you couldn't find it on the X-ray to operate. Anyway, this picture was used on the front of the New York Times with, of course, a caption saying...
This was enemy fire? They didn't do all that fire?
No. They said this was purportedly she was killed purportedly by American helicopter fire.
Purportedly.
But what did they think? You know, the Viet Cong had helicopters. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, purportedly. That's the part of that. You got to think, and I want you to read and find for us afterward that thing that Mr. Chomsky wrote to you in 1966 wanting to quote.
Yeah.
But there's another one.
Yeah, well, this is a picture actually taken during that same period, the Tet Offensive. And we were in a house. There was some Viet Cong outside. And Once again, the reason I'm here is because they
You put
fired
your
a
head down.
rocket into this house, and it was one of those rockets that's meant to explode after it's gone through the wall.
Yeah, I see.
And to kill everybody inside. But the guy who fired was obviously not very good at firing, and the rocket entered just below the floor, which was very muddy.
Yeah.
And in fact, although wounded one or two people, I mean, this whole house collapsed literally about 30 seconds after that picture was taken.
My God.
And,
That's good to underscore. These pictures are, as I've said to another people, you know, they're hard won. When you're in a dangerous situation, journalists, or particularly photojournalists, they have to be on the spot. It's really a dangerous proposition.
It definitely is, yes.
Particularly photojournalists.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, here's another.
Yeah. Well, this is a woman also who was, she's not dead actually, but she's been hit by that same rockets from helicopters that would sort of spray an area. So the very characteristic wounds here, she's bleeding all over. Our little tiny pellets would go all over her body. And this, see, this area that they're destroying was the one area where you could find pro-American South Vietnamese.
Really? One small area?
One small area. What had happened was, when the country was divided in '54, CIA went to the north, dropped leaflets saying that the Virgin Mary had gone south.
Really?
Right? They came south. America installed Diem. They found him in Washington, I think, in a seminary. He was a Catholic. So he was instituted as the president of South Vietnam. All of this totally illegally, by the way. And so these Catholics that came south needed somewhere to live. So he basically built this area. This area was built up on what had been swampland, District 8. And that's where the bourgeoisie lived, the people who worked for the government, the people who had all the best jobs, the Catholics, in other words. And guess what?
What?
That's the area the Americans destroyed. The Viet Cong were brilliant in their, they could have chosen anywhere to have attacked, but they chose this one area. So that the disillusionment that occurred amongst the city dwellers, you see, up to that point, city dwellers had been told, the country folk had been told, if you move to the city, you'll be safe. We're going to declare the countryside a free fire zone. If you move, we're going to kill you. We're going to napalm you. We're going to put Agent Orange down all over the land so nothing will grow. So the people had no choice but to move into the cities, where at least they were safe. Voting with their feet, as the Americans would call it.
Yeah, that's right.
But of course, once they got to the cities, then of course, the traditional Vietnamese culture is destroyed. The fathers become pimps, the brothers become pimps, they're pickpockets, they're prostitutes, their mothers are doing laundry.
The prostitution really went down badly with those women.
Oh, yeah.
They really hated it.
Yes, yes.
I mean, in an inordinate degree.
Yeah.
Well, we better...
and this, I can carry on.
Along,
it's the same caption in a sense, because this is the troops of the 9th Division going through, this is what remained of District 8 after the Americans had essentially annihilated it.
Okay. Okay, we're going to show a few, we could show, there's so many, here. What's this?
This is, what happened was that at something called Pentagon East, which was this enormous complex near the airport, naturally, because you've got to get out quickly if things go bad, right? And this is where the Americans were briefed on the progress of the war. And in fact, there's another picture very near here of the computer. This is it. The computer that proved the war was being won.
I see, right. This is the computer readout that says everything's great.
Everything's okay. No problems. No problems. We're winning. The light is at the end of the tunnel.
That was all the time. They kept saying that. Right until, when did that crack in the American consciousness?
Well, I'm not sure.
That's what I'm trying to say.
But these people believed that the light was at the end of the tunnel, and Ho Chi Minh wasn't holding it.
Yeah. So this is a disaster.
Essentially, this is what the war was all about. Killing people, the largest number of people possible. This was in a place called Quang Nai, which was in the central part of South Vietnam. These were people who'd been operated on. They then discovered there was something wrong with them, and they'd been put in this room to die. They're on the they're sleeping on stretchers. They're living on these stretchers, and essentially, you know, this mother with a baby suckling in her breasts, and these people are essentially, they're there because they're going to die.
I see, yeah. Like a hospice or something.
Yeah.
And then this is the last one, I guess, we have time to show.
Well, this is also, you know, very much a scene where you have people, the civilians, essentially. There were enormous attacks that took place every night, and every morning those who could make it would make it to the provincial hospital, where there was essentially no help whatsoever from the American authorities. The people working there, apart from a few American Quakers, where people like the surgeon, for instance, was a Spaniard, and he had tears in his eyes when he told me, you know, every morning I play God, because I can't operate on them all.
Yeah, right.
So I have to choose who's going to live and who's going to die.
The whole thing is so horrible. And as I was saying to you, what our best estimate of the number of, we had 57,000 deaths, Americans, and there was something on the order of somewhere between 2 and 4 million Southeast Asians were killed in that adventure, which Mr. McNamara finally come to call a mistake. He thought that was sort of an out from the moral responsibility. A lot of karma to be answered for there, don't you think?
I would say, if I was McNamara, I want to live as long as possible.
Yeah. Okay, and listen, why don't you find that quote, if you can, in there, and then I'm going to show just quickly. We're running short on time, but you know the one that you got? You're going to recount that. But this is The Dark Odyssey. We don't want to go through it because it's going to be a little confusing, but this is a handsome book that was published by Aperture with these handsome, handsome photographs. We can't go into them here, but we just wanted to let people be aware of that. And again, you're in the company of the best photojournalists in the world in this book called Dark Odyssey. When did that come out, Mark? That's out.
That's about 5 years ago.
About 5 years ago, and they're in the store.
It's a sort of biographical book, you know. It starts from my first picture I took in Wales when I was 16.
So you were way back in Vietnam, and you were contacted. Would that have been in '67 or so by Mr. Chomsky?
No. It was when the book first, when this book first was
71.
published. Yeah.
And
he came across this
he wanted to get
caption, which
permission
said,
to use a caption, right? There's a caption of a photograph that you had written, or that you were responsible for the text.
No, I wrote it, and some of the finest selling points, so this is of napalm, was explained to me by a pilot in '66. We sure are pleased with those backroom boys at Dow. The backroom boys at Dow. That's what he wanted.
The Dow,
that's what Noam wanted for his title of his book. The original product wasn't so hot. If the gooks were quick, they could scrape it off. So the boys started adding polystyrene. Now it sticks like shit to a blanket. But then, if the gooks jumped underwater, it stopped burning. So they started adding Willy Peter. Willy Peter was white phosphorus.
Yeah.
Right? So now, to make it burn better, it'll even burn underwater now. And just one drop is enough. It'll keep on burning right down to the bone. So they die anyway from phosphorus poisoning.
Oh boy! That's a quote you took from. That was a quote you took.
I interviewed this pilot.
When you did the interviewing, did you do it with tape recorder, or how did you do it?
No, I had a notebook.
So you had a notebook, and so, okay.
I spent. It was one of the first assignments I did. Was to go up to the Da Nang base because that's where most of the flights were taking off to do the bombing.
Right.
And I just hung out for a few days, and I ended up. It produced a couple of pictures.
Now, I wonder if we could talk. We only got about 5 minutes left. Unfortunately, we could go. There's so many photographs, and your career goes back over such a long period of time. One thing I'd like to ask you is, what do you think about what have you had a particular camera that you particularly like to use, and also what are the implications of the digital development of still photography, and what are the implications of the melding of still photography with video digital photography, where they can freeze frame, take one frame, and so forth. And what is the future?
Well, working backwards. First of all, that
you understand a lot of stuff.
That doesn't work. The idea that you can. I mean, this is one of Murdoch's ideas. You send out the film cameraman and you grab what they call
grab the right frame.
grab still frame grabs.
It will not work.
It doesn't work because it's a whole different approach. In movie making, it's a series of amalgam of pastiche of images which you make work, and you can obviously make work brilliantly. What photographers do is we wait for everything to be perfect in that frame. We go around arranging the world into rectangles, and there's one decisive moment in which everything is right.
Well, now what if you're doing that with a digital video camera, and then you take the whole thing 5 minutes before that moment and 5 minutes after, and then grab the right frame? Why can't you do that?
Well, you probably could if you have one of those brains that split down the middle.
Oh, I see.
One half is thinking about putting all these bits together, and the other half is thinking of getting the moment at which it all happens.
Okay, right. Okay.
But as far as as far as the use of digital cameras are concerned, there's one very, very positive development, and that is that for the first time ever, you don't just ship your 10 rolls of film by air freight to the magazine to process and to edit.
Right.
You do all of that yourself, and you send 2 or 3 pictures. So for the first time, you have real control of what gets, in other words, to the magazine. You can, as it were...
you take some out of the roll. You don't have to send the whole...
Well, you don't have to send, because with digital, you just get the... You look at your images on the computer screen, and you pick 1 or 2 or 3, and you caption them and you send them. So the possibility of some person, brain blind, visually illiterate, kid, choosing the wrong pictures, that's diminished, so that you have much more control. The downside is, as one of our photographers wrote rather plaintively from Afghanistan, I don't have time to get drunk with the Mujahideen at night. I don't have time to sit with people and talk about what's going to be happening tomorrow. I'm up until 3 in the morning correcting the color balance and trying to get a good connection to send my picture, transmit my picture with a sat phone. So that's the downside. But I think that will get better as time goes on, because things do get easier and better, hopefully, as things progress. What does it all mean? It also certainly means that we're always worried about keeping, archiving pictures. How long will they last? What can go wrong? And at the moment, all the storage mediums, the nice thing about silver on paper is they found silver that's 5,000 years old in the pyramids. It's still untarnished, But the problem with all that digital stuff is, I've often said there'll be no record of the Gulf War in about 20 years' time.
Why?
Because it was all shot on color negative fades, right? Then any stuff that was scanned, those scans maybe were lost, but probably won't. And of course, all the film was shot on digital, which also doesn't have a very long life.
But okay, I don't understand that. I saw a thing the other day where they're going to take, Smithsonian's going to take the sounds of America, they're going to put them into digital files that can be stored forever, they're saying. Or that we're not going to have to lose. We had Ma Rainey, and there was somebody who taught Ma Rainey. We didn't have the technology to get sound in the past. We now have the technology, and now we have the technology, but it's on discs that fall apart, and we got videotape that falls apart with iron oxide. But when they get it into the digital format, into the computer format, it's in a file that can be just saved forever. I'm off base on that?
Well, no.
Or that it will be saved
theory,
until they get to a new system that is going to keep it going, and we're not going to lose anything from now on.
Well, it is, in theory,
that's my idea.
In theory, it's all possible.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I can take any of these negatives of these pictures, put them, I can scan them first, and then I can archive the negatives, and if somebody finds them in 1,000 years, they're ready to go.
We'll need a librarian to keep track. It's like we'll be getting the Akashic record. We'll be getting everything recorded, and we won't have to lose anything or something,
Well, yes, but at the moment, there's not only, there's the material on which it's stored is not very reliable, but secondly, the format changes are coming along at a very rapid pace, so that there's a possibility that you might end up with something where you have nothing to play it on.
That's a problem. You need to have the machine. So but it's coming all so quickly now. Against 200,000 years of human experience, all this technology, 100 years we've had cameras. I mean, the obscuras, and I mean, it's all now, and it's coming so quickly, and it seems to be moving faster all the time. You're keeping up with that to where you can compete with your daughter?
Oh, absolutely.
Mazel,
yeah.
I mean, congratulations. That's fantastic.
Well, I know, but I think I'm pretty unique in that respect.
Having
because
been
normally, I mean, certainly, you know, I'm obviously much too late to learn how to work the channel changer on the TV.
60% of them are still flashing 12, and we can't figure out how to do good programming.
But with computers, I
With
forced
VCRs.
myself very, very early on to, because that is the future.
Yeah, and congratulations, having brought Magnum early to that. We only got about a minute left. What's happening? You're working on something now, real quick, on Agent Orange. Huh?
Yeah, I've been following the Agent Orange story.
Yeah.
This is the defoliant that was dropped on Vietnam. It's caused all this huge number of deformed children to be born. They still keep being born. They're still deformed. It's a genetic problem that goes on from generation to generation. And America does bear a responsibility. They dropped the stuff. They didn't know it was contaminated. They didn't do it in order to produce deformed children. But that's what happened. And they're so desperately poor, those beautiful families looking after those.
Yeah. The big
children.
elephant walking through the jungle tramples the grass, and I mean and it may be, as we're poised for this huge kind of thing that Mr. Bush is suggesting now. I mean, a big change, a whole geostrategic thing. We may be poised to have a great deal more karma delivered down upon us if there's if it is, as many people, increasing numbers. I saw John Le Carre say yesterday, America's gone mad. You know, and that we may have a huge responsibility, and there should be things in place in order to hold to account the ones that are doing the afflicting, particularly in the name of some sort of an ideology that may be really wrong. It's happened before, and we should keep track of that. And it seems photojournalists have been part of the voice of that conscience, and part of the voice. Magnum's been great, and the president of Magnum is Philip, for 5 years, and a major contributor to the photojournalistic tradition of the world is Philip Jones Griffiths, and we could have talked for about 15 hours easy. And it's been your pleasure. His perceptions and some of his images, the best we'll be able to get them to you. Philip Jones Griffiths, a photojournalist extraordinary, human being, human rights activist in the best sense of the word. Happy to present his perceptions to you. We invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again next week. That's it for this particular segment. Philip, thanks a lot for coming in and sharing your photographs with us.
It's a pleasure.
Okay. Until next week, then. So it just goes, and you just can't get everything in. But we'll try and get those good pictures of that, you know.
You saw the Le Carre piece then?
I saw that Le Carre piece from The Guardian yesterday. Yeah. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it. He just said the country's going crazy. He said it's absolutely unfathomable what the hell they're doing now.
Yeah.
I mean,
my daughter yesterday.
I saw that. Oh, go ahead.
My daughter yesterday was translating it for her teachers in Guatemala. She's there at the Spanish school.
God bless her.
And my daughter in London said that she forwarded it to over 100 people.
Good. Well, it should be. The internet can do that. So you can, and then I also saw Michael Lind. He's a serious writer the other day. And he was reported by Robert Dallek reporting on his book. And he's saying, we say the best president. He's saying that Bush is the worst president we've ever had. He said one of the worst. And some people say, if you think about it.